Hey class, this is Anthony Vittorio. I'm here to talk to you about the sport of lacrosse and the history behind it. It is the fastest growing sport in the nation as of right now. Also, if you were watching Sports Center recently in the Sports Center Top 10, you'll notice that lacrosse comes on quite often and more than it ever has before. And that's because of the popularity of the sport growing and the fact that it's the fastest growing sport in the nation, as I said before. Thus, maybe you want to know about it. So, as a lacrosse player and coach, I am required to know the knowledge of the sport, and I can tell you about the mechanics and how to play it and learning the rules on a separate day. But today we're here to talk about the actual history behind where the sport came from, and that is one of the main important things that a lacrosse fan or player or coach should know. Today I want to talk to you about and elaborate more on the history of lacrosse, and it came from the Native Americans, primarily in the Six Nations, which is located in the northeast quadrant of the United States. All the tribes around what is now North America and parts of Canada played the sport as well, but some played with different equipment and had different rules as to who plays who, if they play for a gift, if they play for bragging rights, or if they're just playing for plain old fun and or training, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But the southeastern tribes used 2 sticks in each hand and a small deerskin ball when they played the sport. And the other tribes up in the Great Lakes, where the Great Lakes of America that connect to Canada are, they played with a stick similar to the one you see here, but this one's a little longer than that one. We'll get to that. But this one right here, the Great Lakes played with a 3-foot long lacrosse stick, and it's just one lacrosse stick, not like the southeastern tribes where they use two sticks in each hand. The Iroquois tribes in the Six Nations, like I mentioned before, use a stick like this. And this one actually came exactly from Six Nations, Cornwall Island in Canada. As you can see right here in the writing, it's a little hard to see. It's a stamp, but it was handmade by the Mitchell brothers, and it's a field stick. And when I say field stick, you're probably wondering, okay, why is it called a field stick? Well, obviously we play lacrosse on a field, but I want to mention that because there's also box lacrosse, which is heavily popular in Canada right now. Basically, they play inside of an ice rink that has turf and or carpet on top of what would be the ice in an ice rink, and they play 5-on-5, and they only use short sticks. In field lacrosse, the defenders have longer sticks so they can reach you because it's a bigger amount of area that you have to run. So there's that about the different tribes that we just talked about. And also I want you to notice that lacrosse sounds very French if you just say it. Usually a lot of French words like Lafayette or Lafayette, as y'all say it in the South. Lacrosse sounds like a French word. Well, you're exactly right if you were thinking that. It came from the French settlers. They discovered the Native Americans playing it, and they developed a more controlled way of playing the game, and they made it to where you just play on a field instead of like the native tribes played on acres of land, which is a lot. The stick also represents a cross, so that's where lacrosse comes from, the word lacrosse. It's a French word for a stick that resembles a cross. What many people don't know is that the Native Americans actually called it Wachiqua Ace, which means to bump hips. And this is a contact sport. So all you football players or fans or hockey players, this is definitely an interesting sport to transition to or to add to your arsenal of sports. Lacrosse is another form of training for war as well. This is a very cultural sport. It came from the Native Americans, and they also called it the little brother of war because they used it to toughen up their warriors. Later on, when the sport was developed to be a more civilized sport, rules and organizations were applied. So what that means is it slowly took a little while for this sport to transition into a lot of popularity. And let's talk about how it became the fastest growing sport and the troubles that prevented it or slowed it down. Lacrosse became popular with the French and English settlers, but it slowly became the sport that was overlooked by the majority of the people because of the sports like baseball, our true American sport, and American football. There was also huge international issues with the Native Americans themselves. They were considered unprofessional because they didn't have enough money to travel to different countries to play internationally, so they were not accepted until the 1980s when the Native Americans came up with the Iroquois national team. And the Iroquois national team has been around since the 80s, and they're not going anywhere. This is their sport. They invented it. This is their culture. We borrowed it, but we are still spreading the love of the sport. For the people that invented the sport, that most of them are very talented at it. They play it often. It's like a ritual sport. It's not just an everyday, every other day sport. It's a way of life for most Native Americans. This sport means something more. And that's where the publicity and the popularity comes from. When you educate people about the actual history of this sport, they become more interested and more grateful that this sport exists. In the beginning of my speech, we were talking about the ESPN top 10 plays of the week and how there's a lot of lacrosse clips out there nowadays. It took years and years of organization to get this far. And now that the sport has grown from the Northeast to the Central region to the Southeast region and all the way to the West Coast, it is the most rapidly growing sport in America right now. Now, to add to the growth of the sport, a lot of other nations are picking up on it. And what I mean by that is a lot of people are going on mission trips to spread the love and growth of the sport of lacrosse. It's a very entertaining sport. It's a very contact sport. And I recommend, if you didn't know already, Canada's national sport is not hockey. It's lacrosse. And also, the Native Americans were here before us Americans were here, or any other settlers. So maybe this is the true American sport. You decide. Thank you.